Welcome to a special episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Normally, we'd be doing a This Week in Diaspora History, but today we're going to speak about recent controversies over Whoopie Goldberg's Holocaust comments, Nazis in Florida, and using Jews as a tool in the game of politics. Let's get started. I'd like to start this episode by clarifying that I'm a little disappointed. I sometimes plan ahead and have positive stories to talk about in the Jewish Diaspora Report, but it seems like maybe it's just the time that we're living in right now. There just seems to be endless anti-Semitic issues, Holocaust issues that seem to be needing to be reported on. So it's unfortunate that yet again I am stuck talking about anti-Semitism on a constant basis. And I do hope that we can maybe move forward onto happier, better, more positive topics. For anyone who has not heard the recent news about Whoopi Goldberg's comment she made on The View, I'm going to play a clip for you in a second, and we're going to kind of break it down piece by piece. Just as some backstory, this comment was made in reference to the canceling of books about the Holocaust in a Tennessee school that was actually spoken about on our last podcast. And Whoopi Goldberg had said this.
Well, also, if you're going to do this, then let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
It's about
a different race. But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man. That's what it's about.
But it's about white supremacy. It's about
but
going after Jews
not about
and race.
But these are two white groups of people.
Well, how do we have to black people
see them as white?
But you're missing the point. You're missing the point. The minute you turn it into race, it goes down this alley. Let's talk about it for what it is. It's how people treat each other.
So here we have Whoopi Goldberg speaking and claiming that the Holocaust was not so much about race, more so just how people treat people. Specifically mentioning that because the Jewish people of Germany, Poland, and Europe, and Eastern Europe, of course, were white-facing, we should say, white complexions, that somehow this makes it not about race. People have talked, commentators have said a lot of things. You've probably heard it all over the news, how silly and ridiculous this idea is, so we won't go into that. One thing I will say that actually kind of surprised me was the lack of pushback. We hear a little bit of pushback from the other women on the panel, but not really pushing back too much. We actually hear in the full clip, the producers ended up turning on the music to try and play them off. I think they were behind the scenes saying we need to end this conversation. But what was really kind of scary is the way that Whoopi Goldberg was pushing. You can hear in the clip, she is really adamant about her stance. She was not having anyone else speak. She was speaking over top of people. I don't know if this was maybe a way to realize, I said something wrong. I need to clarify it now before it's misunderstood. But I'll be honest, the explanation was just as bad as the rest of it. Of course, most people will say, like I will say, is that I don't think that Whoopi Goldberg is necessarily saying something out of hate or racism or anti-Semitism. This is clearly just the exact ignorance that we're talking about from people who don't understand the Holocaust well enough to understand that, of course, it absolutely was about race. And yes, European Jews tend to be white-facing, but they are still seen as a different race in Nazi Germany. They are called the Nuremberg race laws that the Germans created in order to identify who is considered to be Jewish based on blood and race and ancestry, and also how to strip them of all of their rights and freedoms. I'll be honest, I'm kind of perplexed with the ferocity that Whoopi Goldberg was trying to prove her point. I just can't imagine how someone who obviously has not lived that experience can try to make such claims and be so forceful as if to be an expert on the topic. After the program ran, some time passed. Obviously, I'm assuming she spoke with the producers and also possibly even the public relations people at the TV station, but she eventually came out with an apology on the Colbert Report later that night.
Would you care to follow up
clarify what you said this morning?
I don't know,
because it confused some people.
It upset a lot of people,
yes.
which was never, ever, ever, ever my intention. I thought we were having a discussion because I feel, being black, when we talk about race, it's a very different thing to me. So I said that I felt that the Holocaust wasn't about race.
We could understand that Whoopi Goldberg has her own lived experiences, her own lenses that she views issues, and of course, no one could be faulted for the upbringing and lens that they bring to different issues. I guess, again, I'm still stuck with the question of why she felt that she knew enough about this situation to try and make such a very bold statement and not listen to anyone else. And also in her apology, sort of seems confused as to why other people are giving her issue with her statement. Not really sure why. And we'll see what she said following that.
And people got very, very, very angry and still are angry. I mean, I'm getting, all of the mail from folks and the very real anger because people feel very differently. But I thought it was a salient discussion because as a black person, I think of race as being something that I can see. So I see you and I know what race you are. And the discussion was about how I felt about that. I felt that it was really more about man's inhumanity to man and how horrible people can be to people. And we're seeing it manifest itself these days.
So far, she's saying a lot of very interesting things and seemingly the right things. But unfortunately, what I haven't really heard as much of an apology as much as a number of excuses as to why what she said was sort of okay and just an opinion and didn't mean to hurt anybody with her opinion, but she kind of thought this was a discussion. So why is anyone getting upset about it?
But people were very angry and they said, no, we are a race. And I understand. I felt differently. I respect everything everyone is saying to me. And I don't want to fake apologize. I'm very upset about that people are misunderstood what I was saying. And so because of it, they're saying that I'm anti-Semitic and that I'm denying the Holocaust and all these other things which, would never occur to me to do. I thought we were having a discussion about race, which everyone I think is having. When you talk about being a racist, I was saying you can't call this racism. This was evil. This wasn't based on the skin. You couldn't tell who was Jewish. They had to delve deeply to figure it out.
The idea that the Germans didn't know how to identify Jewish people from the way they looked, supposedly based on stereotypes, is, again, ignoring history. There was plenty of books written and charts created in order to try and identify Jews from a distance based on facial features, noses, size of head, whatever it might be. And you could find these in the very clear archives of history. Let's be honest, propaganda itself is a form of trying to show the public what a quote-unquote Jewish person looks like. So there in itself, it is based on visible characteristics. Her supposed apology continued.
If the Klan is coming down the street and I'm standing with a Jewish friend and neither one, I'm going to run. But if my friend decides not to run, they'll get passed by most times because you can't tell who's Jewish. You don't know. It's not something that people say, oh, that person is Jewish or this person is Jewish. And so that's what I was trying to explain. And I understand that not everybody sees it that way and that I did a lot of harm, I guess, to myself.
Again, a little bit of a lack of apology here, more explanation and focusing more, I guess, on her career and how she's harmed her own reputation. But let's ignore for a moment the, of course, non-white facing Jewish people from North Africa, people from all over the world that have different complexions than the Ashkenazi Jews. Let's ignore, of course, the Hasidic Jews that are typically wearing very identifiable garb that we've seen recent upticks in anti-Semitic acts against them. Let's ignore all of that and just focus on the fact that she claims that Jewish people are not easily identifiable. And we'll cut away from Whoopi Goldberg's apology for a moment just to take a listen to this clip from Florida over the weekend.
You know, look at him. Guess where you're going back to?
We know you're a Jew. We can tell by how close your eyes are together, you
That is the sound of a bunch of neo-Nazis waving swastika flags and yelling at a driver that I can tell you are a Jew because your eyes are very close together. Personally, I've never heard of this stereotype, but apparently it is one that goes around, that they are feeling like they can easily identify Jews, and then followed it up, of course, with an inappropriate word that was bleeped. So here we see a real-world example of the fact that Jewish people can be seen in a way as a minority that can be identified by the people who hate them. Whoopi Goldberg, in her apology, continues.
You know, I get it. Folks are angry. I accept that, and I did it to myself. This was my thought process, and I will work hard not to think that way again.
Have you come to understand that the Nazis saw it as race?
Well,
because they might, asking the Nazis, they would say, yes, it's a racial issue.
Well, see, this is what's interesting to me, because the Nazis lied. It wasn't. They had issues with ethnicity, not with race, because most of the Nazis were white people, and most of the people they were attacking were white people. So to me, I'm thinking, how can you say it's about race if you are fighting each other?
When I watched this for the first time, I was honestly floored. I wanted to give Whoopi Goldberg the benefit of the doubt. I was listening to her apology, and despite the fact that she wasn't officially really apologizing and just making excuses, I thought maybe she's understanding a little bit here. And then for some reason, when Colbert asks her if she now understands the difference between Nazi Germany and race and Jews, all of a sudden she just reverts right back to her original position, which is that race was not a thing here.
So it all really began because I said, how will we explain to children what happened in Nazi Germany? I said, this wasn't racial. This was about white on white. And everybody said, no, it was racial. And so that's what this all came from. So once again, don't write me anymore. I know how you feel. Okay, I already know. I get it. And I'm going to take your word for it and never bring it up again.
I was so disappointed. It just kind of went downhill after the first few sentences of sort of trying to apologize to the ending here where she's being extremely dismissive and kind of being like, just stop bothering me about this. It's over. I said what I said. Maybe I'll learn a little bit. Maybe I'll think about it. Seems like what she's sort of suggesting is I'll just not say things like this. Not that she'll reconsider her position or try and educate herself, just that she won't speak about it again. And I honestly was just very disappointed by this apology, supposedly. And following this, of course, she went back on The View the next day and then had one more apology because maybe someone had mentioned to her that her attempted apology on Colbert didn't work. So she tried again.
Words matter, and mine are no exception. I regret my comments, as I said, and I stand corrected.
I'm assuming that this was the apology that she was told to say from the beginning. Very short, sweet, and to the point. Unfortunately, on a 10-minute, 15-minute interview with Colbert, she unfortunately reverted back to apparently her original opinion. One positive in a way that came out of this, and it's not the suspension of Whoopi Goldberg, which I don't think is going to teach her any type of lesson or make any changes in the world. Hopefully she uses this time to educate herself, but it's not very, she could do that even still while on The View, maybe have some Holocaust survivors on her show in order to set the record straight, whatever she chooses to do. But what I will say is that at least people are talking about this. And one thing that I thought was absolutely abhorrent is the fact that the story about Whoopi Goldberg has lasted longer in the news than a hostage taking that lasted almost an entire day in a synagogue. That story seemed to disappear within 24 hours. There were a lot of people downplaying that it wasn't really anti-Semitism. The person really was just someone with mental health issues, not talking about the racial anti-Semitic issues. Yet with Whoopie Goldberg, for some reason, for days now, everyone's talking about anti-Semitism, how it's affecting people, the rise in anti-Semitism. So in the end, maybe possibly the best thing that came out of this is the fact that we are talking about it and that people are understanding anti-Semitism, unlike when gunmen enter synagogues or when people are attacking Jews in the streets. That doesn't get any airplay on the networks. Another interesting insight that has come to my attention is the guilt that many of the Jewish community feel over the Whoopi Goldberg suspension. Somehow Jews, as the victims of this comment or inappropriate characterization of the Holocaust, somehow feel guilty as a community for what happened to Whoopi Goldberg, as if we are at fault for